Welcome to the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee meeting. Today I have with me Councilmember Warsami, Councilmember Palmisano, and Councilmember Reich. We have a quorum of 4, and so we're going to proceed with this meeting. We have one item on the consent agenda, and that first item is the Minneapolis Employee Assistance Program lease. And this is to authorize amendments and extension of current contract for office space at 314 Clifton Avenue to a 3-year lease for the Police Department's Employee Assistance Program. Council members, anybody have any questions or want to pull that? No? Hearing none, I want to move for approval of the consent item. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. We have 3 items for discussion today. I'm just going to name them really quickly, but we're going to start with the second item. And so the second item is Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, and it's to authorize a contract. And we'll have that person speak in a little bit. The third item is a shared hosted next generation 911 call handling system, and 911 will speak about that. And then the fourth item is the Viking Stadium construction, the compliance report, and we'll have the folks from Civil Rights be last on that. So with that being said, the first item for discussion is the Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Dean Christensen with the Minneapolis Police Department. I'm in charge of the Emergency Preparedness Unit and Homeland Security. We are for the council to approve the request for council action allowing the MPD to contract with the CEL as described on the RCA. The contract will allow us to develop a Minneapolis-specific training program for counterterrorism. From this, they will be producing a video that talks about the 8 signs of terrorism. This is a behavior-based training program. The target audience for this will be civilians, security, people working at the different venues. We hope to have it in place before the All-Star game so that we can get the staff at the All-Star game trained to look for these signs of terrorism. And then a second component of this is having a centralized reporting system for these terrorism calls, either through 911, 311, or 411, things like that. So we're having a centralized area so that the proper resources can be dedicated towards the suspicious behavior and the things that are going on with that. It's kind of short and simple. Any questions?
Any questions, council members? Wow, that seemed more like a consent item. Well, hearing no questions, I'm going to read the full piece on the police department or the Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, and then we'll just move for approval on that. But it's to authorize a contract with the CEL, which is the Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, for the development of a community awareness program with a customized training program and training video tailored for the Minneapolis community for a cost of $197,000, of which $100,000 is to be reimbursed from the 2013 Urban Area Security Initiative grant awarded to the City of Minneapolis for emergency management, and $97,000 subsidized by the CEL. And so I will move this item for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to recognize that Councilmember Cam Gordon joined us right before the presentation started, but I didn't want to cut into the presentation. The next item is 911.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Heather Hunt. I'm the 911 Director. We have a presentation today reporting back to Council on the progress of the shared hosted next generation 911 call handling system that was authorized by City Council resolution late in 2012 for us to move forward with, and now we're at a point where we're ready to take a couple of next steps toward the purchase and implementation of this regional call handling system. Our request today is to receive an update on the status of the system and to authorize staff to participate in the finalization of a cooperative agreement for the parties, we'll talk about that in a minute, of the Shared Hosted System Consortium, and also authorize staff, along with the MESB, who has been designated as the contract manager and fiscal agent for the project, to begin contract negotiations with the preferred vendor for the final configuration and pricing of the system. We do have, I have a presentation here that condenses some of this information. You also should have a copy of the report issued by PSC Alliance titled Minneapolis Emergency Communications Center NG 911 Telephone Project Proposal Analysis and Recommendation. We also have comprehensive documents related to this project that are available if there are questions and need for further detail. The Metropolitan Emergency Services Board is a body that governs emergency services in the metro area. Councilmember Reich was the Minneapolis representative. Now that has been moved to Councilmember Johnson. And we have been talking about a variety of projects. This umbrella represents the overarching umbrella of the MESB Public Safety Communications Program. And you can see in the lower left-hand corner, the yellow box that says Shared Hosted Call Answering is one of the projects that the MESB has been involved in. And I show you this slide just as an orientation to the comprehensive nature of the MESB's Public Safety Communications Program, and that this project is a part of that comprehensive plan. These are diagrams. There won't be a test on this, but this is the current state of 911 system equipment in the metro region. You can see that there are 9, I don't have a pointer, I'm sorry, but there are 9 sets of common equipment sitting in 9 back rooms in 9 different locations. And each of those is connected to its own silo, if you will, of call handling equipment. Currently, they don't talk to each other except at a very high level because we're all interconnected to the state's emergency services network. So the desired or concept future state that we have moved toward and are ready to implement on some scale is those 9 sets of backroom equipment are condensed into 2. You can see the 2 boxes between the 2 clouds, and then the PSAPs, public safety answering points or dispatch centers, hang off that architecture, the cloud, and 2 sets of common equipment which are shared and hosted by the participants. The entire project, of course, has been driven by the desire to virtualize equipment and improve interoperability, much as we've done with the statewide Armor radio system. Any dump truck can talk to any cop anywhere in the state of Minnesota, and we want to have that same interoperability and connectivity between our 911 centers. Again, we formed this consortium to plan the strategic replacement of our end-of-life legacy 911 telephone systems. There are 9 agencies in the metro who all have older equipment that is reaching end of life or has reached end of life and needs to be replaced. So rather than proceeding on an individual basis and maintaining that silo approach, we came together in this effort in order to strategically replace this equipment in the best way to ensure public safety for the citizens. The benefits of the shared and hosted system, again, interoperability between PSAPs, and a PSAP, again, is a 911 center. The acronym is Public Safety Answering Point. You'll hear that a lot from me. It will allow ease of transferring calls between the 911 centers in times of high volume. In case of disaster, it adds another level of redundancy and reliability to the system because there is no single point of failure. It allows for streamlined training that staff at all of these participating centers will be using the same software and hardware to accomplish their job. We will be able to have a single maintenance contract rather than multiple maintenance contracts. We'll also all move toward a more common operating picture, which will help us with best practices going forward in bringing 911 into the next generation. And again, as I said before, it's based on the approach that I sat in on some meetings more than 20 and less than 30 years ago when that was just a concept. And I'm proud to say that the 911 project has benefited from the experience of everyone in the statewide radio system. And we've whittled our time frame down to about a year and a half of work on this. So progress to date, we had the council pass the resolution authorizing an RFP for this system. That was in December, I believe, of 2012. We issued the RFP. We issued the RFP. We received 5 responses. They were evaluated by the consortium and narrowed down to 3. We have chosen the vendor that we believe represents the best value for the solution that was requested. And we have drafted a cooperative agreement that governs the ownership and operation of the system, allowing for future partners, allowing for partners to leave the consortium under certain circumstances, guaranteeing certain voting rights on the operation and configuration of the system, because these are the details that can be the devil in these types of arrangements. So we realized that though we started with 9 participants, we have a group of 5 that are ready to move forward now in an incremental approach to implementing this regional system. The 5 are City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County Emergency Medical Services, Alina Emergency Medical Services, and the City of Edina. The future partners that are still a part of the consortium and will be parties to the contract negotiations with the vendor are Ramsey County, Dakota County, Carver County, and Ridgeview Medical Center. So you can see that it really is a substantial group of metro agencies participating. This is hard to see. I apologize. It's small, but it represents our timeline for implementation. And we're hoping that if we can begin contract development and get a signed contract by early April, we'll be able to purchase equipment, train our staff, and install in first quarter of 2015. So we're asking for authorization to participate in finalizing the cooperative agreement that I just spoke about as an alternative to individual purchase. And we have retained the option to do an individual purchase if for some reason we're unable to get a satisfactory cooperative agreement among the parties. We needed to make sure that we had that fallback position. It's not our preferred approach, but it's a safeguard. I do have, funding is already authorized through the CLIC capital process. We have money that we need to spend in 2014, which is, again, why we need to get going on this. And then the remainder in 2015. It's estimated that we'll be coming in at less than what has been budgeted, so we don't anticipate any individual or additional appropriation. In fact, we'll probably clear the 5-year cost of ownership for less than is currently budgeted. At least that's the indication that we have right now. And of course, until a contract is negotiated, we won't have firm numbers. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
I have a few. With regards to being this project being budgeted, I mean, how much is it budgeted for?
$1,950,000.
Okay, and in terms of having more partners, does that mean that Minneapolis's contribution becomes less because we have more partners, or are we still on the hook for the same amount?
The pricing is delivered in two buckets. One is the initial purchase, and the remainder is the maintenance over 5 years. So we have a total 5-year cost of ownership that we're looking at. If additional partners come in further down the road, we would see our costs decrease potentially in the maintenance contracts, but that wouldn't affect the individual purchase because we're going to be making that right up front. There are some shared data center costs that then would be dispersed among the individual partners, but those data centers are largely the maintenance costs. And I do have comprehensive documents available for your review if you'd like to see exactly how all that breaks down.
And when we buy this product, who is going to own it?
It's going to be owned by the consortium. There will be a system owners group governed by this cooperative agreement that we'll be crafting and entering into.
Anyone else with questions? No questions? Oh. Councilmember Reich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think one of the drivers of having a system is the system itself. Granted, you can find efficiencies in cost and cost sharing, but it's the performance that really is the driver of this effort. And I speak that just briefly working with this multi-decade effort to modernize 911. One of the things in presentations that I've seen is the things that we really can do with the tools we all have now as citizens to assist our public safety officials when things do arrive. Not only the frequency and the time frame, but being able to employ different tools like GIS, et cetera, now are actually possibilities with this new technology platform, let alone the jurisdictional information and the clarity of, we're one big metro. When something's going down, on the border of Bloomington and Minneapolis, the system, I think a system like this better serves that situation. So just to give a little background.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Maybe just to follow up about the financing, I think there's a concern that we're putting in our fair share, but we're not putting in more than some of the other entities. So, so if we share the costs, so is there a sense of what the other partners are putting in? Is it comparable to our one? Well, I know that not all of that, some of that is ongoing costs over the 5 years, but it looked like you were saying it's 1.6 now million, we're thinking, is closely estimated not to exceed that. So how does that compare to what the other partners are putting in?
Councilmember Gordon, it is based on a per workstation count, and so each agency is paying for the amount of equipment that they will use under the system. And then we have apportioned a share of the data center costs according to the workstation count. So it's all based on a percentage of the size of the system that Minneapolis is going to use, the size of Hennepin's system, and then Edina, of course, is much less because they only have 5 workstations on the system.
I appreciate that detail. It makes me feel like we've done a good job of making sure that it's a fair way of accounting for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, hearing none, I move for approval of the item. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 All those opposed? The motion carries. We're going to move on to our next item, but before we do that, I do want to recognize a council member who's here just watching us, and thank you, Councilmember Fry, for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember Yang, for having me. I'm mainly just here just to listen to item number 4.
Okay, great. Well, let's start with item number 4 then.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Velma Corbel. I'm the director in the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights. And the action item before you today is a request that you receive and file the Viking Stadium Compliance Report. In addition to the items that I will go through and just read through from the action item just to give everyone the chronology, you should have a pretty comprehensive package of information that went out with the agenda, and that should include a narrative overview as of compliance progress through December 31st that was prepared by Mortensen Thor. There's also a design services stadium progress report as of December 31st that was prepared by HKS, the design services firm. There's a stadium women and minority business participation report as of December 31st, also prepared by Mortensen Thor. And then lastly, the multi-purpose stadium workforce utilization summary as of December 2013, also prepared by Mortensen Thor. And I will just go back through the chronology of how we got to where we are today. You know, there was a Viking Stadium legislation that everybody was watching really closely because the city of Minneapolis had such a significant stake in the financing of the stadium and also the operation of the facility once it goes into operation in 2016. So very soon after the stadium legislation was passed back in May of 2012, the Civil Rights Department and also the CPED deputy director, who was at that time the lead sort of owner's rep on the project for the city of Minneapolis, started having meetings with the stadium authority about what the city's requirements would be for equity and inclusion on this project. And in May, June timeframe of 2012, there was some staff direction issued by the city council. I think it was authored by Councilmember Glidden and adopted unanimously by the city council in 2012. And the action item that you have before you, and I'll just go through and read these items just so you know what was in that staff direction, but also that you know how the Stadium Authority and its partners have been working to make sure that the staff directions given to the City Council are being met in an ongoing fashion. So that direction to staff in May of 2012 included the inclusion of the Civil Rights Department as a contractor to the Stadium Authority to collaborate on the monitoring of the project. The direction was also to include goals for construction contracts to be awarded to women and minority-owned businesses at a percentage based on the goals that had been set on the highest performing development contracts in the city of Minneapolis. It asked for inclusion of goals for workers from zip codes that have the highest rates of poverty and unemployment. It also asked for the inclusion of hiring goals to be provided for vendors in the stadium operation, which is yet to be discussed and determined. It asked for regular reports, and then it also asked for an inclusion of workers from the city of Minneapolis. And so we'll have the individuals who will come up and provide their reports and a little bit talk about the progress on those things to date. In addition to that May 2012 staff direction, there are some other things that happened with equity and inclusion that brought us to where we are today. A few months after the staff direction came out from the City Council, it was in August of 2012, the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights, following the direction for the City Council, set goals for the first time ever on a huge project like this on the design services. And there actually was quite a bit of back and forth between the city and the Stadium Authority on what the goals would be on design services, because it was a new thing, hadn't been done before. So we ended up setting the goals for architectural and engineering on this project at 11% women business enterprises and 8% minority business enterprises. And the Stadium Authority, after having gone through that process of being involved in the goal setting, I think really wisely understood how serious the city of Minneapolis takes equity inclusion on projects where we have significant funding. And they went out in October, November 2012 timeframe and put together an agreement with the Metropolitan Council for some loaned executives from the Metropolitan Council's Office of Equal Opportunity. And those individuals actually worked with the Stadium Authority up until it hired its own equity director. Those staff who were very familiar with equity and inclusion on projects that have been done at the Metropolitan Council were helping the Stadium Authority pull together its equity and inclusion objectives. In November of 2012, the Stadium Authority approved the Design Services Inclusion Plan, and shortly after that hired HKS as the design services firm. The contract for HKS was about $34 million, including the reimbursable expenses for HKS. And at the time that HKS was selected as the design firm, there were also a number of women and minority architectural and engineering firms that were brought on board as a part of that contract to meet that 11% women business enterprise and the 8% minority business enterprise goal. And we'll have the individuals talk about that work to date. In December of 2012, the Civil Rights Department then developed the goal for the construction contract for 11% women business enterprises and 9% for minority business enterprises. And this was done to make sure to include a broad range of women and minority firms. Familiar with our small and underutilized business program here in the city, the companies that can participate in our program have to be certified by a certain third-party certification to be eligible to participate, and that certification is through the Minnesota Unified Certification Program that includes the Met Council, Minnesota Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and the City of Minneapolis. But for this project, $975 million worth of project, it was opened up to allow a wider range of third-party certified businesses to be able to participate. So not only are the companies certified under the Minnesota Unified Certification Program eligible to participate, also businesses certified under the state's Targeted Group Business Program are eligible, and companies also certified under CERT, which is certification used by the City of St. Paul, Hennepin and Ramsey County, and the school district. In February of 2013, because we're in 2014 now, February 2013, about a year ago, the Sports Facilities Authority approved its construction services equity plan, and which I think is really important to understand the components of the equity plan, because it was in that plan that included the City of Minneapolis was involved, the Sports Facilities Authority, the Metropolitan Council, and a number of folk, because it was here that the remainder of those directions from the City Council to staff were actually included in the Sports Facilities Authority equity plan. And so those components included the employment assistance firm that was called for in the legislation, requirements for job fairs, inclusion of targeted businesses. The workforce inclusion percentage was finally articulated here at 32 and 6 for minority and females respectively. There was a compliance oversight committee requirement, and then there was also veterans inclusion, affirmative action certificates, and then a creation of a construction manager equity review panel. the equity review panel for the construction manager actually occurred during the selection of the construction manager. And there were 3 firms that were actually submitted bids to become the construction manager. The city participated in that equity review of those companies that had bid on the construction of the stadium. And the city continues today to be a member, participating member of the Stadium Oversight Committee, and that committee meets about every 2 months. In February of 2013, the Sports Facilities Authority selected, March, selected Mortensen Thor as the construction manager. And then in November of last year, the guaranteed maximum price was negotiated between the Stadium Authority, the Vikings, and Mortensen for a total of $763 million worth of construction on that facility. In June of last year, the Sports Facilities Authority hired its Director of Equity. It ended its agreement with the Metropolitan Council for the Loaned Executives when it hired its Executive Director. In October, Summit Academy, OIC, was brought on as the employment assistance firm that was specified in the stadium legislation, and also the council staff direction. In November of last year, per the council's direction, the Civil Rights Department here in the city created the list of 17 zip codes in Minneapolis with the highest poverty and unemployment from which to target hiring of individuals to work on this project. And I can tell you, I have information on the zip codes, but if you're interested in seeing how those zip codes were selected, to see sort of the methodology in going about identifying those, that summary is on the Civil Rights Department's website. And then you'll remember that just about a week ago, the City Council approved an increase in revenue to the Civil Rights Department for the Sports Facilities Authority paying the city to use its compliance database for compliance monitoring. And so that's kind of the background, and then we'll get into the reporting here with our 2 guests, who are Lynn Littlejohn from Mortensen Thor and Alex Tittle from the Sports Facilities Authority. And Lynn Littlejohn has been with Mortensen for 17 years, and they've been partnering with Thor Construction on major public infrastructure projects in the region for a large part of that time that she's been with them. She's been the lead staff person on inclusion and equity work for the construction and or renovation of sports and entertainment venues in the region, including the Excel Center, Target Field, TCF Bank Stadium, the Central Library, the Convention Center expansion, and then most recently, Orchestra Hall. And then Alex Tittle, as I mentioned, joined the Sports Facilities Authority in June of 2013. And prior to that, he was the director for the MnDOT's Office of Civil Rights, where his responsibility was to oversee inclusion and equity compliance for all the major road and bridge projects that the state builds. So I'll ask Mr. Tittle to come up first, and then I'll ask Ms. Littlejohn to follow him.
Good afternoon, council members. Mr. Chair, I think Velma did a really great job of introducing me. I think I had an opportunity to meet several of you with my chair, Michelle Kelm-Helgen, a few weeks ago, almost a month ago, talking to you all about our progress to date. But it's a pleasure to have met or to meet some of you that I haven't had the opportunity to interact with. So I'd like to thank you for your time last month. As Velma said, I'm Alex Tittle. I'm the Equity Director for the Minnesota Sports Facility Authority and have been so roughly since about June of last year. And respectively, my role and responsibility is pretty much surrounds the ensure of the equity plan is followed by the construction manager at risk, as well as the design services manager, which is HKS, as we mentioned before. I'm going to talk about 2 things in perspective. One, the design services report, and I think you all should have a copy of that. That was on the link that Velma sent out. as well as an update as to how the project is moving forward with its resources that are outlined in the equity plan, specifically the Stadium Equity Oversight Committee and how that's functioning, as well as the employment assistance firm that we've elected or we've awarded to last October. Okay? The bigger discussion around the equity, or excuse me, the equity program is around transparency. I look at transparency in a number of different ways. Specifically, how do we get information to the community to ensure that the investment that they've made in this project is being insured, okay? Specifically, the Stadium Equity Oversight Committee. As Velma mentioned, it happens every other month. We recently concluded one state Equity Oversight Committee meeting last month on the 30th of January, where we opened that meeting to the public. Anyone is invited to attend. From now on, it will take place in the 1010 building, and you all are definitely welcome. And you should be getting invites to that meeting on a bi-monthly basis. During those meetings, we'll talk about some of the standards within the equity program, and then most importantly, we'll talk about we'll provide reports by our design services manager as well as our construction services manager, in addition to our employment assistance firm, to make sure that any challenges that we might find in our employment efforts are being resourced properly. The other part around transparency would be the EAF. Now, as Velma mentioned, October 3rd of last year, we awarded the contract for the employment assistance firm to Summit Academy OIC. And the method that we encouraged Summit Academy to follow in response to this contract was to not only do it or find or help find people, but do it in an inclusive way. So what Summit Academy response was to involve approximately 16, at the time it was about 17 different consultants. And that ranges from the Minneapolis Urban League to MCTC, St. Paul College, a number of other nonprofit organizations throughout our community locally, to ensure that they provide one or two services. One, find people who are qualified to enter the trades immediately and respond to the workforce need on this project. And two, if the individuals do not have relevant qualifications to conduct construction efforts on this project, to provide them an avenue to receive training, being one of their, I believe it's 9 nonprofit and or MNSCU organizations for training. Okay, so as of the first of this year, we awarded or we requested for services to Summit Academy OIC to find approximately 100 trainees or 100 qualified workers through one of the different venues, which is qualified individuals or individuals who needed training. And then, of course, ensure that they are ready to go to work. Now, you're probably asking your question, how did you come up with the 100 number, and how did you figure out which ones to actually pursue, or which trades to pursue, and so on and so forth. Without taking up too much of your time, I'll say that we've leaned on the leadership from Mortensen to request all of this, at the time, awarded subcontractors to the table. They all came to the table, and we requested that they provide us their current workforce capacity. And from that workforce capacity, we requested to know how many minorities and women do they have on staff. And whatever their gap was is pretty much what we were going to respond to Summit Academy and their 17 partners for identification for work on this project. So, and then on top of that, we actually sat down with a number of the skilled building trade associations and talked to them about their ability to aid in this process. Because this cannot happen without ensuring, based on how the project is moving forward, this cannot happen without the involvement from the building trades. So their input and their ability to be a part of this process is necessary. All right? Any questions about the EAF before I proceed? All right. As for the design services update, you should have in your possession a copy of the document. Has HKS on the front side of it. I won't go through every single line, but I will say this is a report as of the 9th of January. So we'll always be relatively a month behind in reporting, simply because we got to see where all of our women-owned businesses, our minority-owned small businesses, and our veteran-owned small businesses are within the course of this project. So from a women's business enterprise standpoint, which Velma mentioned is 11%, 11% is the goal. We're trending at 11.11% as of the commitments made to this project. There are 13 women-owned small businesses, and they've been committed to a total number of $3,567,630. Okay. As far as minority business enterprises, we've also said that the goal is 8%. We're trending at 8.89% for commitments. Currently 17 small minority-owned firms, and the commitments are at the tune of $2,852,690 to date. Talking about the course of the project, when it comes to the design services, as of November of last year, we just met our 100% design documents. So the next step in the process is to receive the construction documents for this project, so that our construction vendors, which you'll see on both sides of this sheet, can employ the rest of their work. So that's kind of why everyone hasn't completed, most of their work, because we haven't gotten to that point for 100% construction documents. We'll be at 50% construction document as, hopefully, knock on wood, as of Friday of this week. So that you'll see, so hopefully as of next month, we'll see a larger number of these sub-consultants receive committed dollars towards their effort on this project. All right. Any questions about the design report?
Councilmember Gordon.
Maybe you shared this already, but I was wondering why the minority business goals are so low. It's 8%, and that just seems like it could be higher for me. Who set the goal, and why did we set it at 8?
As Council Member Gordon, Velma Corbett was actually part of the process that actually identified what that is, and she'll explain what that is.
Thank you. The goals for both design services and on construction are set based on the number of ready, willing, and able firms in several different directories. I mentioned the Minnesota Unified Certification Program. I mentioned the Targeted Group Business Program at the state, and I mentioned the CERT program at St. Paul and others. When a goal is set on a project like this, it's not a factor of just counting up everybody that's in a directory and setting the goal that way. It's also based on the scope of work that will be performed during the project. And so the goal is set based on the number of firms identified in the particular scopes of work that will be conducted during a specific contract. And for this scope of work, all of the directories that we looked at indicated that there were 11% women, 8% minority for design services. And one of the things that should be noted is the goals are set on on this work at the very tail end of a recession. So where there might have been higher goals because there would have been higher numbers of businesses identified in the directories several years ago, we are on the tail end of a recession. It wasn't kind to a lot of small businesses, so a lot of those businesses that existed in those directories several years ago just don't exist anymore. So we set the goals based on the ready, willing, and able companies as of the date these goals were set. The other factor to consider is that we really expanded the kinds of certifications that would be accepted on this project, because we knew that if we only use companies certified, for example, with the Minnesota Unified Certification Program, the goals might have been 5 and 4. Or had we set them just with the companies certified under CERT, the goals could have been a lot lower than that. But in order to glean the most participation and inclusion by women and minority firms on design services and construction, this was opened up to third-party certifications of several different types, because we wanted this project to be inclusive of as many people as could be included. And so by doing so, with those different certifications, we were able to do that.
Well, thanks, and I appreciate that answer. I think kind of what that highlights is that we tend to set the goals based on the availability out there, so that we're realistic about it, and so that what might show to us is that there is some room for improvement in terms of the companies that are able to handle this kind of work and the training that's needed. It is a bigger kind of policy look or a longer term effort. I also really appreciate that we pulled out design work separately and looked at that, because I know if that was just wrapped into the entire project, the likelihood of any minority and women-owned design firms getting involved in this would have gone down immediately, and people would have relied more on getting their numbers to look good based on the construction trades, where it's easier. And just notice that the goals for the construction end of it are much higher, 32, I think.
For the workforce.
For the workforce, right. So that just kind of shows maybe a difference in the work environment and what's available out there that's interesting anyway.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I'd also like to point out, too, that the Viking Stadium is a significant infrastructure project to this region and to the state. But it's not the only project ongoing in the city of Minneapolis right now that has these same sort of aggressive inclusion goals on them. Green Homes North and Target Center renovation. We have gone in the Civil Rights Department, when I started here in 2010, from monitoring about $350 million worth of infrastructure work in the city to about $750 million in a 3-year time period. That does not include the Viking Stadium. So where we've set these goals for women and minority business inclusion and workforce inclusion on the Viking Stadium, we have set those same types of goals on those other projects. So it's our expectation and intention that we're going to build capacity in the community more significantly than we've ever done before, because of all of the work that's going on.
And if I may, so then in effect what can happen is next year or the year after we'll actually raise these goals, because we'll say, oh, there's a lot more businesses able to provide these because they got developed and they were able to kind of grow into it over the time. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilmember Reich, before you begin, I just want to recognize that Councilmember Johnson just joined us, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was on that point. There seems to be this accumulative effect of capacity that's being developed. I mean, on the one hand, we have partners like Summit who are providing and enabling us to do what we need to do now with the goals we have. But this has to flow back to them as well in terms of their capacity and scale as an enterprise. Let alone just sort of the reverberation effect of the word on the street. You know, this is how you get hooked up with a training, a job, and then I think working with our partners in the labor world, a career. I think the capacity effect moving forward, to Councilmember Gordon's point, is something that is going to be lasting and enduring, and the gift that'll keep on giving.
Mr. Councilmember Wright, that's exactly what we're doing, is not just giving people jobs during the construction of these projects, but helping develop careers for them for the long term. Because this is our workforce for the future we're developing right now.
Mr. Tittle, I have a question for you with regards to your memo that is dated January 21st, 2014 here. And on the section that talks about workforce diversity, the last bullet point points to 4 workers from the targeted Minneapolis zip codes having worked on the project. And, you know, as I remember a little bit earlier, there were 17 zip codes in Minneapolis that were, low income or poverty areas. And so I'm wondering how can we just only have 4? And what's the effort on your parts to increase that number?
Well, unfortunately, there isn't like a mandate to have workers from these areas. However, there is a requirement that I've communicated to the construction manager to monitor that. The report that you have in front of you is for a limited space and time. Obviously, we're in the very early stages of this project. We anticipate the numbers to grow substantially. And of course, a lot of that's going to come through our recruiting efforts and things of that nature. So there's a lot of dialogue going on between our EAF, our construction manager, and my organization to conduct informationals to get more people from the local community to be engaged in this project. But understand that we have a responsibility to bring the best qualified folks to the table at the time needed. So as we develop them or locate them as time moves on, we'll be able to bring more to the project.
But there must be some sort of I guess, if not explicit mandated goal, though, that there is an implied goal that you want to hit or you want to have about maybe 17 different representatives from 17 different zip codes in Minneapolis. I mean, that's a good goal to have, isn't it?
I think it's a great goal, and obviously it's a great effort to move towards. However, we haven't communicated a stretch goal or any type of target for the construction manager to pursue at this point. It's just we're basically during our bi-monthly meetings are going to be communicating that this is where we are relative to the zip code reporting period, and we're going to make an effort to target individuals from these areas, specifically as it relates to the EAF or the Employment Assistance Firm, as they recruit and identify individuals ready to go to work. They're going to be targeting those zip codes as well.
Council members, any other questions? Councilmember Wasami.
I had one clarifying question. Is it 4 zip codes or 17? Because
17, but we've identified on the previous document that for reporting purposes, so far in the project, there are 4 individuals who have been working on the project from those
4
17.
individuals?
4 of the 17 working correctly.
Okay. All right.
Or currently.
We have a long way to go then.
We have a very long ways to go, and I think I'd like to say that before Lynn Littlejohn with Mortensen Construction comes up here, it's always been the case, and I have had a little bit of experience working with her on the Twins and the TCF project to start out successful. Because where you start is normally, hopefully, is the way you finish. You start out short of the goal, or you start out with bad performance, you're probably going to end that way. And this definitely is not the case to date. So as we see about 3 to 4 months already on the project, we're definitely trending in the right direction. And Ms. Littlejohn will give an update on that.
Okay. One follow-up question. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that there was 100 people, 100 individuals that were going to be trained with
Correct.
Summit Academy. Are those 100 individuals chosen from the 17 zip codes, or are they chosen from somewhere else?
Those individuals will be recruited or outreached per the EAF. They have autonomy to go out and find these individuals. However, I've scripted them with some parameters. We're looking for minorities, we're looking for women, we're looking for veterans to address the equity plan specifically, and of course we're looking for individuals from these particular zip codes. However, what comes back will shake out to be what comes back. We can't necessarily script. We're not going to receive individuals who are not from these zip codes, or we're not going to receive individuals who are not minorities or women. We're going to try to impress this project to ensure that, one, we are safe on the project, one, we complete at the time prescribed, but for my selfish reasons as the equity director, to ensure that we not only meet but exceed our workforce and our targeted business goals.
All right, thank you.
Well, in this situation, I mean, we're batting less than 250, and in baseball, I mean, batting average 300 is pretty good. So I want us to be at 1,000 actually, but
Hey, you got a friend on that one, sir.
Okay, Ms. Littlejohn.
Thank you, council members.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Lynn Littlejohn, the Director of Community Affairs with Mortensen Thor. We are the construction manager at risk for the construction of the Minnesota Multipurpose Stadium. Basically, my role is to make sure that we comply with all the requirements of the equity plan and coordinate with all of our subcontractors so that we are successful in terms of not just achieving the goals with regard to subcontracting and workforce and veterans, but that we exceed the goals. I'd just like to add before I get into the details of this report that, Mortensen's had a long relationship with the city of Minneapolis, has built pretty much most of the high-profile projects here, and have always been successful in terms of achieving and exceeding those goals, and we expect to do the exact same thing as it relates to the Minnesota Multipurpose Stadium. I think as Director Coble mentioned earlier, you have a packet of information which details kind of where we are through December. There are several documents. There's a narrative that just kind of gives you some high-level details I'll talk about a little bit here. And then you have kind of the detailed WMBE report, Women and Minority Business Enterprise report, that outlines all of the awards that we have made through December on the project. It lists all the first-tier firms and then their commitment as it relates to women and minority-owned business participation, and then the firms that they have made awards to, and then it just shows you as we kind of go on through the project how payments will be made to make sure that those commitments are actualized. And then you also have the detailed workforce report that identifies all of the subcontractors who performed work on the site through December and the total hours they've worked, and then that broken out by minority, female, and veteran. So those are kind of the detailed reports you have in front of you. But what I would say is that just in general, we were awarded the contract to be the construction manager March of 2013 and spent a significant amount of time in kind of what we consider pre-construction phase in terms of helping price and estimate the design as it was progressing to ensure that the design kind of aligned with the budget that was outlined for the project, and then worked our way to kind of a guaranteed maximum price, which, as Mr. Tittle said, is $763 million for the construction of the actual stadium. So, and also during that time, then we started some significant outreach to the community to kind of inform them about timeline and schedule as it relates to commencing procurement, to give firms an opportunity to be prepared to take advantage of, the procurement opportunities as they came down relative to the project in advance of actual construction commencement. So a part of that was information sessions that we conducted over the summer here in the Twin Cities and all around the state to the contracting community, again, to just outline the timeline of the project, the schedule, the procurement schedule, so firms really would have an understanding of their particular scopes of work, when their particular scopes of works would be procured, so they could take advantage of that, to understand kind of insurance requirements, bonding requirements, just all the things necessary to be ready to take advantage of that procurement as when we commence. So those went very well here locally and across the state. I think firms were genuinely pleased with us making effort to come to them in terms of we went to Rochester, we went to Duluth, we went to Mankato, and then we were here in the Twin Cities. And I think what you see with regard to the WMB report and where we are to date, I think is testament to that outreach in terms of making sure everyone was informed. What the report says here through December, obviously we've talked about what the goals are: 20% aggregate, 11% women-owned businesses, 9% minority-owned businesses. We, through December, have procured a little over $400 million worth of work, with $136 million of that being committed to women and minority and veteran-owned businesses. So that puts us right at about 32% against that $400 million. And then we're talking about a significant, 15 minority-owned firms, 21 different female-owned firms so far through December who've been awarded work. Those contract values range from about $5,000 to $4 million, and I think what that speaks to is that it really is a wide breadth of firms and the size of firms who are being involved in this project, not just the handful of large firms, but that we really are reaching down and reaching back at all tiers to make sure that even the smaller firms here have an opportunity to be involved to help them grow their capacity. I think there's some discussion about capacity building and how we increase the pool of firms just as we move forward, and we definitely see that this project can have an opportunity to do that. And then with regard to workforce, the goals are 32% minority, 6% female. They are expressed as a percentage of work hours. And through December, we are at 41% minority, 11% female, and about 2% veteran work hours. So we feel positive about being able to start out in a positive vein in terms of exceeding the goal, especially typically doing kind of, earthwork, dirt work, kind of coming up out of the ground, as we say. We've had contractors who've had some challenges and struggled in terms of being able to meet the goal. So we're pleased with the level of participation we see from a workforce perspective as we actually get started and come up out of the ground. Most of these work hours is reflected with regard to the earthwork and the excavation work, which is ongoing, which really is in the demolition work. I don't know if any of you have kind of driven by the site lately, but the loading dock is primarily gone. We are actually now starting to actually tear down the structure, the dome itself. So that work will continue through the spring. The demolition will go through April. And then we will also have some of the actual concrete work starting of the actual new structure. So that is what will occur probably now through spring. There is approximately, probably 100, 120 workers on the site currently. In January, we anticipate that will increase to about probably 300 in the spring. Just to kind of give you an idea of kind of movement and what we anticipate occurring as we go through spring. But we feel good about where we are with regard to both subcontracting. We feel good about where we are with regard to workforce. Feel good about the messages that we have given to all of our subcontractors who have been awarded work to date, all committed to achieving the workforce goals. The workforce goals have become a condition of their subcontract agreements. The commitments they make with regard to subcontracting levels with regard to women and minority-owned business also become a condition of their subcontract agreement. So we take this seriously. We've communicated to all the firms, a lot of them who know us, who know Mortensen, who know Thor, have worked with us in the past, and know our commitment to inclusion and diversity in that, what our expectations are. And then I think there's been some discussion about kind of workforce capacity. We recognize with regard to the 32% minority and the 6% female, kind of a significant increase specifically in the minority goal over a little over a year ago, and understood that in terms of, this level of project, this size of project, how to make sure that the project was successful. And I think as Mr. Tillo commented on about having meetings with all of the respective unions to talk about capacity, to talk about what exists within the respective unions currently, how that would impact and play out as it relates to what the workforce needs are for this project, what specific the contractors have in play, and then kind of what that gap is and how to make sure that we fill that pipeline to have the requisite workers, the requisite scopes, and the requisite trades available. What we have seen is that where the largest gap exists currently is in the specialty trades, kind of the mechanical, the electrical, structural, and those tend to be the scopes of work that, work the majority of work hours on a project. And so in terms of being successful as a project as a whole, you have to be successful within those scopes. And so we have done a lot of work up front to make sure that we understand what that gap is and equipped the EAF with the right information to be able to go out and do that outreach and recruitment and vetting to place individuals in the correct trades so that we can be successful. So I think just, overall, I think my closing comments would be we feel good about where we are in terms of initially. We're not done. We still have a couple $100 million worth of work to procure. We will put another sizable procurement package on the street in the spring, which will be all of the finishes in the interiors. There historically here is a lot of coverage from women and minority-owned firms within those scopes of work, so we fully anticipate that there will still be a lot more participation to be had, and we will be having more outreach sessions early in the spring before we release that procurement package so that all those firms know that opportunity is coming forward. So, but just in terms of where we are right now, the level of commitment we've received from the subcontractors and kind of, the proof so far, we are headed in the right direction.
Thank
So
you.
That, if anyone has any questions.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move for approval of this compliance report, which is just to receive and file it. All in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Just before we adjourn, I just want to kind of commend all these efforts, and I think that we should acknowledge that Mortensen has worked above and beyond to accomplish this and the goals you've achieved so far. I think we probably all want to see more zip codes listed for various reasons on that, but still, I think some of the skills and the techniques you've developed should be shared with other companies and other efforts here. And so I just wanted at least to note the appreciation. I think that we acknowledge seeing how well you've done accomplishing the goals so far.
Thank you. And seeing no business before us, I will adjourn this meeting. Councilmember Johnson, I apologize.
That's all right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and I apologize for being late. And it's not about this, but Ms. Littlejohn, as you were talking, you gave such a thorough report. I was thinking a question in my head, and then you'd answer it before I could raise my hand. So, very good report. But I just, Mr. Chair, I wonder if this committee should put on its agenda a discussion about the budget action that we took last year about applying for a federal grant for, I think it's 10 police officers. And it was a decision that we needed to make to plug the budget if we were going to accept it. We were accepted for the grant, but then we have to show that we will follow through with our matching funding. I just wonder if it might be timely that we ask for a presentation about where we're at with that and how we would proceed if we wanted to fully accept the grant.
That would be great.
Okay, so
Yeah.
would you put that on the agenda for the next meeting then and inform police and finance, I guess, are the two
Okay,
that
that
we
sounds
should hear
great.
from. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will say again, seeing that there's no more business before this committee, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.